Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Saturdays with Dad. This is part 2 following up from what we were talking about last week about the 90s. So this is 95 to 99. So what's your opinion on that small time frame?
I actually thought I'd, have a lot of albums in this period because, again, there was a lot going on in the 90s. But surprisingly enough, I found more albums I liked in the early part of the 90s. And I think possibly as we get into the new millennium, there'll be more albums that I like as well.
That's fair enough, yeah. So before we start into 95 and so forth, we have got one that we didn't talk about last week that's a new discovery for you, not necessarily for me, because I'm familiar with this group. But here we go.
Yes, I came to these very late. Soundgarden, this is Superunknown. And Neve had played a couple, the song Black Hole Sun, which I think was really good. So I thought, I'll check this album out. And I found I liked it a hell of a lot. And although it's very grungy, very sort of like a bit like Nirvana and all that Seattle sound of the late 80s and early 90s, obviously Pearl Jam as well. This is an album that I particularly liked, and obviously Black Hole Sun is the wonderful song on this. It's very, very good, and Chris Cornell's voice is fantastic on that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great. It's a great album. Alright, now we're gonna start into the actual video. So we'll start with 1995, kicking off with...
Oh yes. 1996, Hamburg. My wife Maura and I saw Radiohead just after they released the Benz, and it was one of the best gigs that I've ever been to. We came out of the concert thinking, what an incredible band this is. And this is their second album, and it's just so ahead of its time in so many ways. I could go through the tracks that I like, so My Iron Lung, Street Spirit obviously is wonderful, very melodic, Fake Plastic Trees as well. It's just an incredible album. And a lot of bands make their first album, and people tend to get disappointed by the second album. This is in the opposite direction. This album is just amazing. I recommend this to anyone. So this is Radiohead's The Benz. Very great album.
Another new discovery for you.
Yes. One of my friends where I work, there was massive Smashing Pumpkins fan. He kept on saying to me, you must have seen them loads of times, because he just worshipped them. I never really listened to them. I saw a couple of singles. It was only when Neve said, well, let's start really listening to this band, that I realised how good they were. And this is the most, it's a great, it's almost like a psychedelic feel to it. I mean, Bullet with Butterfly Wings I like, and Tonight is a great song. But this is quite a long album, and there's a lot of great stuff on this. And also, I have to let you into a secret. Is it Billy Corgan?
Yeah.
Of Smashing Pumpkins, a massive deadhead.
Oh, really? Of course you know that.
But, obviously doesn't help. That doesn't harm himself in my eyes.
We actually did a song, a cover, of 1979, which is on this album, which is quite a popular song, with our band, which we performed at the gig that we did before the lockdown happened.
It was very good indeed. Very good.
Me on bass. Alright, so 96 now? Yeah. So, this is a favourite of mine.
Tool, Enema, what can I say? Progressive, dark metal rock at its finest. Tool, they are a fantastic band. I mean, their discography is very sparse compared to a lot of other bands, but when they commit, boy, do they commit. And Enema is a fantastic, fantastic album. I have to be honest with you, Neve, it's not my favourite album of theirs, that's going to come later. But this is a super album. So this is Enema by Tool. Ooh. I suppose Fish are my latter-day Grateful Dead. I love Fish. I think I possibly, with Neve, are the only people that we know in this country, and I'm sure there are people out there, that not only like Fish, but actually know who they are, and actually know that there's an ice cream made by Ben and Jerry fish food. I remember a colleague brought back a tub, and I said, why do they spell fish like PH? And I sort of went, oh my God. So anyhow, I digress. So this is Billy Breathes. And I suppose this album has the feel of an American Beauty kind of album, you know, where it's a bit like Farmhouse, where, you know, it's a sort of like very mellow. It's not like their normal jam music and everything. I mean, the album starter 3 is a real summer rocking anthem, but there's some really, really good stuff on this. Swept Away, I absolutely love. Prince Caspian, it's just an amazing album, and you know, it's so difficult to get the vinyl on this. Incidentally, we have one for sale, I think. But I would recommend Fish to all Neve's viewers out there who are prog. I would recommend Fish to you. If you've not heard of Fish, or you've heard of them but never heard their music, get on it, right? Because I think their stuff's on Spotify as well, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
All their stuff. Now, really, really listen to them.
Probably
Fantastic.
Get a CD of them as well.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
All right, next up.
So that's Billy Breathes by Fish. As we go towards the new millennium, and I know I've been berating the lack of an inspirational figure in British music, along comes this fella, Stephen Wilson. His band Porcupine Tree are a shining beacon of great music that we once had in the 60s and 70s. It is no surprise to you that a lot of the prog musicians of the late 60s and 70s commissioned this man to remaster
their albums,
their classic albums, you know. And so, but I digress. So this is Coma Devine, which was a live album in Italy, in Rome. It is it's an amazing live album. The musicianship on this is just fantastic, and the atmospherics on it is just fantastic. If you want to listen to a great modern prog live album, this baby is one of them.
Or just a modern prog band.
Oh, just a modern prog band. Yeah, so that's Coma Devine, that's the Porcupine Tree.
Alright, so I think this is the last one for 97.
Whoa.
So this is
right.
a monster of an album.
This is a special edition out of my favourite, well, certainly up there, one of my favourite albums ever. This is Radiohead's OK Computer. I'm not going to go too much into it because if I did, I would start going on for the next half an hour. But it is, to me, one of the greatest albums ever made. And I think it was Neve's first introduction to what I would call a different type of music. When she was very young, she heard this in my car and she just wanted to know what it is. And it is such a special album to this in our family as well, wouldn't you say so?
Oh yeah, I kind of grew up with Radiohead in a way.
Yeah.
Think about it. Because we got you that I think it was like Greatest Hits album, and then it was in the old car for ages, and we used to play it all the time.
Yeah.
So.
But this is just, I mean, I could go through every single track, Paranoid Android, No Surprises, and just go, it's just an amazing album. And I would imagine that I would say a good 80% of your subscribers and followers, Neve, have a copy of that album.
I mean, it's got its prog elements. I mean, Paranoid Android's it's got the same structure as Bohemian Rhapsody, which is pretty much a prog song in and of itself. Yeah, it's got the different sections, different parts, different time signatures, and I know that they are very heavily influenced by prog on this album. Yeah. So it is progressive in its own way. I wouldn't call it strictly prog, but I wouldn't, you know, say it hasn't got its prog elements. It's like a Pink Floyd in a way.
But an interesting thing as well, this album, according to Tom York, was very, very influenced by Pet Sounds. The Beach Boys
as well.
Pet Sound.
But that's just an all-around influential album.
It is. So this is Radiohead's OK Computer.
Probably one of the most influential albums of the modern day. Moving into 1998.
Ooh. This is The Story of the Ghost by Fish. This is a bit like, in a way, it has the same kind of feel as Rift, but it's a bit lighter, if you could possibly say. So it's a very, very much a prog album. It's just another amazing album by these four guys. It's got the prog bits in it. It's got weird psychedelic stuff in it. It's just completely out there. There is one track on here, Brian and Robert, which is Trey Anastasio. Well, it's a whole band's tribute to Brian Eno and Robert Fripp. That's how much they love King Crimson and Prog and Genesis and everything. But it's not strictly prog, but Brian and Robert is fantastic. Wading Through the Velvet Sea, amazing. Gaiuti the Pig, now that is a real prog song, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a fantastic. This is a fantastic album, absolutely fantastic. This one is a special edition, and it's a speckled vinyl. So this is The Story of the Ghost by Fish. Ooh. Right, we're now taking a complete different turn here. One of the guys who I think is the most amazing guitarist is Warren Haynes. When he left the Allman Brothers, he left it. He left the band with the bass guitarist Alan Woody, who is. They left probably around about the beginning of the 90s, and they formed Government Mule. They are basically more than just a rock band. They play everything. I reckon you could go to Warren Haynes and say, can you play U2, and he'd be able to do it. They've done albums where they've just done covered Pink Floyd stuff and it sounds like Pink Floyd. He is fantastic, but their solo stuff, well, their band stuff, Government Mule, is fantastic. It's sort of southern rock, blues. What you see, what you get a load of fantastic musicianship in it. And I think their best album, Dose, and I recommend this to anyone that likes great rock and blues. And I would say but I don't think you'll get the album because I think there's none of them about. But obviously you could get the CD and the download. There's one track to me that stands out, Raven Black Knight. That is just an amazing song. So get your computers out, log into Spotify and listen to Dose by Government Mule.
Last year of the decade, we have 1999, and there we go.
The Foo Fighters. So this is There Is Nothing Left to Lose. And this is the one album of theirs that all in all that I love. When my wife and I came back at the late 90s from Hamburg, came to live in London, I went down to and I saw this, everyone's talking about the Foo Fighters. And so I just saw a CD there and I just bought it and I love it. Learning to Fly, just the whole of it. What's the name of the last track I love on this? Is it Ain't It the Life? No, it's not the last track, but Ain't It the Life. Oh, M.I. is good, but Ain't It the Life is one of my favourite songs of the 90s, and this is a great album. So this is the Foo Fighters, There Is Nothing Left to Lose. Red Hot Chili Peppers. My daughter on my left introduced me to them.
And I discovered, well, I'd known about them for a long time, but it was only when my boyfriend came along and has a very much a big love of this group from a young age, like a childhood thing, that I kind of decided to listen to them. Because I had a weird thing about them that I didn't really like their sound for a long time, but then in the March lockdown that we had last year, I just decided to listen to By the Way, which is going to come later, but I listened to that and I thought this is a very talented group, and so I then told Dad about them, played a couple of songs, and then you decided to listen to more of their stuff.
Yeah, well, it's well documented how good Flea is as a bassist, and he's a great bassist, Deadhead as well, can I just say. But also the great John Frusciante as well.
Who's a Prog fan.
Who we'll be talking about in conjunction with bands like the Mars Volta, Omar Rodriguez Lopez. This album is a great album. It's not my favourite. That's to come. I think Neve already mentioned it, but this is a great album as well. I love Road Trippin', and Parallel Universe is a great song, and I recommend this to anyone. And what a great way to end the decade with an album like that. So
it's quite an explosive one.
Oh yeah. So this is Californication by the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
And lastly, to end the year.
Yeah, I suppose as we're going along, so my Neve is going to introduce me to a lot of bands that really I hadn't heard of that much, or haven't really heard at all. And one of the bands she said to me was Dream Theater.
Funnily enough,
I've heard of them, but I never heard their music.
It was funny though, because I played their stuff a lot, and then you didn't really kind of get it until we went to the concert last year. I think that's when you...
Well, it's not last year, it was the year before.
Oh, year before now, sorry. It was last year, it was February 2020.
Was it that we went? Oh, it was last year, sorry.
And that was when I think it clicked for you.
Well, I thought they were incredible live, and they played all of this live.
Which they've actually released as a live album now. We were there.
So we went to see them in what I used to call Hammersmith Odeon. I think it's called Apollo now, isn't it?
The event in Apollo now.
Oh yeah. So anyhow, I digress. This is a fantastic album. This is, all of it. It's a concept album, so you can't really do it justice unless you hear all of it. And it's just the musicianship. John Mayall as a bass guitarist, and obviously John Petrucci, Mike Portnoy, who's a big Beach Boys fan. I thought I'd just say that. They're just a great group. They're just a great group. And what can I say? I saw one of the best concerts I've seen, and I just said, Neve, I've got to get this album. And
I already had it.
I'm way ahead of you on that one.
I think
I would say again. If that Californication was a great way to end the 90s, this is even greater. This is a really great album of jazz, prog, dark rock.
And metal, of course.
And metal, which is just wonderful, and it all comes together in this album for me.
Yep.
So this is Metropolis Part 2 by Dream Theater.
If you don't know where they got the name Metropolis Part 2 from, it's they did a track on Images and Words, which was early 90s Dream Theater, which was called Metropolis Part 1, and everyone was like, well, where's Part 2? So they just decided to call the album Metropolis Part 2. I think that's the story.
What a good idea that was.
Because everyone's like, where's the second part? Alright, so I think that's the end now of the 90s, so we'll be moving into the 2000s next week.
New
My
millennium.
territory.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think that's it. Anything else to say?
No, 90s was interesting because as we go into the new millennium, I think a lot of the bands that were making albums in the 90s then sort of made their greater albums in the new millennium. I mean, if we're talking
Tool,
if we're talking of, well, Mars Volta, basically, if we're talking about, actually, to me, Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Oh yeah.
So the new millennium is going to be very, very interesting because this is the really the decade of, for me and for Neve, of the new prog that was coming through, but basically more or less in the States. But as I mentioned earlier, with one glowing exception, which is Porcupine Tree.
/ Stephen Wilson.
Correct.
Alright, so I'll see you next week. Then I'll probably see you guys tomorrow for another video. Yeah. Bye.
Bye. Have a great week.